Hi folks, this is Juan Newsom. I'm back for part 2 of the biblical case for the free market. Just wanted to go over a recap of, what we talked about last time. We talked about, what is freedom, natural freedom versus spiritual freedom given to us by God. We also, talked about how God created man in his image and how we try to imitate God in our own ways in this natural world. We also discovered that because of the fallen nature of man that, we are subjected to a sin atmosphere, and that some of the things that we experience in this lifetime is a result of, atmospheric sin or, adverse circumstances. We also talked about the nature of the man, which is, man is a tripart being mind, body, and spirit, and that each of those parts of our being have, particular needs. We talked about the conservative and the liberal vision for those needs. We feel that the liberal vision for meeting those needs are mostly material: food, water, healthcare. We also discovered that the conservative want to meet those needs, but through the spiritual way, someone providing for themselves via the marketplace, especially someone having the ability and the wherewithal to do so, which is dependent on less reliance on government and more reliance on your own self, and exercising that freedom to do so. We also talked about how society was built in a similar fashion to the kingdom of God, and how sometimes this principle can be distorted because of the conditions of man's heart. We talked about how God's kingdom also, sometimes man's kingdom try to mirror God's kingdom, and how we set up our structure our society based on those principles. We also talked about God being love and being vulnerable, giving man the choice. When you look at the Bible, you can only deduce that God is a God of love and choice, and he wanted man to choose rightly. He commissioned Adam to cultivate the garden and to start a family, which means God wanted a family. He wanted a family to love him. He wanted a society of free moral agents that would freely choose him out of love and a desire to be in relationship with him, not fear. And so here we are at the second part. We're going to talk a little bit about freedom, but more so about, I want to lay down some biblical, biblical free market examples, and how that relates to, having a free market capitalist system. And first of all, capitalism, just to talk about it, capitalism is private ownership of capital goods, and it allows you to use those capital goods for production and a creation for profit. That's what capitalism allows. You have some people now in this country, they advocate for, socialism, which is state-based, and, it says that the state owns private property. That's what socialism is. And that, the distribution of that profit is based on human needs. What advocates of socialism don't tell you is oftentimes human needs exceed the property, because when you have a socialist system, you have, a lot of responsibility as far as the government, and you have high taxation, and it hinders growth. It hinders wealth creators, because wealth creators know that the fruits of their labor are going to fund the welfare state. It's not going to fund, private ownership. It's not going to spur, the expansion of private ownership. So it hinders growth. It hinders creativity. It hinders, that freedom, that economic freedom that we have here to take advantage of today. in the United States. When you look at the nature of man, and we'll just touch on this just for a second. The nature of man, because we are made in God's image, and God is powerful, and he is, everything in the earth is his, as the Bible says. I truly believe that. So God is wealthy, whether he wants to be or not. He doesn't need possessions. He let us have private ownership. That's a part of being free. He gave man dominion, which gives man the freedom to have ownership over property, over goods. And I really think that's what our founders saw. When you look at how they crafted our Constitution, we have a checks and balance government. We have the three branches, because the three branches allows man to not only find his hidden skill, talent, or ability and put it onto the marketplace, but the three branches of government ensures checks and balances, and it maximizes freedom. Also, we can distort this principle as well. You have people that advocate for socialism or totalitarianism, which means they crave for power. As one of my old mentor and friend Chris Bird says, men have problems in three areas: power, money, and sex. And so those three areas can really trip up a man, and a lot of times it's power. We crave power because we were crafted in the image of God, and God is all power and omnipresent. And I think sometimes, when you look at the history of the world, we build these institutions that are reflective of the power that we crave. Just look at, just for example, healthy example, NFL Hall of Fame or the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. We crave that eternal longevity, because the Hall of Fame says that you're one of the best of all time, that you're, in a worldly sense, you're eternal. So just look at some of the governmental systems that we build. Look at some of the world organizations that exist in this world. We crave that omnipresence. We want to be present everywhere, and it's healthy. We have these, and sometimes it's unhealthy because it reflects how we govern. Look at some of these governments that are so controlling. You have governments that want to intrude on the private lives of, the citizen. So we, in a sense, we crave this omnipresent government. We want to be present at all times, which is a distorted principle, because we can't be in all places and all time, but because we're made in God's image, and that we're in this fallen state, we crave it in an unhealthy way. I hope that makes sense. So in a sense, we have an attempt to duplicate his nature, and we saw this before in the Tower of Babel. Man created this tower to try to reach to the heavens. So just to look at some examples, of the free market in the Bible, I want to zero in on some of this stuff. When you look at, and I love some of these principles. When you look at when Jesus taught the parable of the 10 coins, there were men that the master gave coins to, 1 10, 1 5, 1 4, 1 2, one had 1 coin. And everybody doubled their, what was given, except for the guy with 1 coin. And he told the master, "Look, I know you to be a hard man, so I took what you gave me and I buried it." Which was the exact opposite of what the master wanted him to do. And at the end, the master took away his coin, gave it to the guy with the 10, and said, "You know what? Some that have will get more, and some that don't have what you have will be taken away." And I feel like, that when teaching that parable, is such like the character of God. displayed, because God gives us sometimes according to ability. He gives us according to what he knows we're going to do with. You notice the man gave him 1 coin. The master gave him 1 coin. And that's so like God. Sometimes we have to prove ourselves. The word says that, if you're faithful unto another man's possessions, then you'll get your own. That's so the principle of God. And so, there's something to learn from that. The parable of the hidden treasure, I feel like we see this here in America. The parable of hidden treasure, there was a man. He found a hidden treasure in a field that he didn't own, so he buried the treasure. And this you can read in Matthew 13. There was a hidden treasure in the field, so he didn't steal it. He did the honest thing, buried the treasure back, went home, sold all his possessions, bought the field, and was able to procure the treasure honestly. And that's great. That's a great verse, one of my favorites. The same thing with the pearl. It's the treasure and the pearl in Matthew 13:44. But I feel like here in America, in the greatest land, just think about it. You were born, and I'm especially talking to the Christian. God, with his foreknowledge, chose you to be born in the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America, where it's free as you can get in this world. And you were born here. You could have been born anywhere else, but you were born here. And I believe that people that were born in America, and this is just my personal belief, can be destined for greatness. We have the best opportunity of anyone. Just look at the history of this country and our founders, and how, we have a free market because we have freedom. The free market isn't evil. Capitalism isn't evil. It's people that are evil that operate in it sometimes. But capitalism is the byproduct of having a free nation. It's the byproduct. It's not the nation. It's not the system of people say, well, this evil capitalist system manipulate. No, it's a byproduct of having freedom. And so you're born in this nation. You have no excuse unless you're permanently disabled, God forbid, or if you have some other troubles. I can understand that. But if you have sound mind and a sound spirit, and you have all of your limbs, and you have all of your faculties, you are destined for greatness if you just tap into it. And I truly believe that. And in this country, the sky is the limit. Do you think we would have, look at some of the figures that we have. Oprah Winfrey. Do you think Oprah Winfrey would be where she is if we had a controlled government? Paul Mitchell, the guy who makes hair products. This guy was homeless, selling his products out the back of his car. And now look at him. Michael Jordan, look how hard he worked throughout his career. Do you think we would have those type of stories, those rag to riches stories, if we didn't have a free market capitalist system? Look at McDonald's, Ray Kroc. Look at Target. Look at Home Depot. Look at Federal Express. Somebody wrote the business plan. A guy found the business plan in a trash can, and he started the business. That's insane. That just doesn't happen. So to me, the free market is very moral, and it allows for work. And the Bible talks about hard work. If you look at some of the Proverbs, Proverbs 13:11, which is one of my favorites, says, "Dishonest money dwindles, but he who gathers little by little makes it grow." Hello, work. Good planning and hard work brings profit. Proverbs 14:23, Proverbs 21:5. One of my all-time favorites, and this is just the epitome, I think, of the free market. Proverbs 18:16. A gift makes room for you among great men. That means if you have a skill, a talent, or an ability, if you have something to sell, put into the marketplace, that great people will seek you out. And they will. It happens. There's so many examples of that. There's so many examples of that. Look at, how King Solomon built his temple. There were a lot of tradesmen and, foragers and, different sets of skills, not only in the country, but he got some of the best tradesmen in the world to come and help build this temple. King Solomon imported supplies and goods and, and that's a free market. That's free trade. Even though he was a monarchy, King Solomon, or theocracy, so to speak, but a God-appointed king. But the engaged in trade and getting skilled laborers from other countries, that's free market right there. Just to give you an example, look at Nehemiah. In the book of Nehemiah, the wall of Jerusalem crumbled. Nehemiah was so heartfelt that the king that he was serving in captivity let him go, and not only let him go, but sent him along his way with supplies and with money and with resources. Do you think Nehemiah would have gathered those resources if he were demonizing the rich or if he resented the rich? No. If you look at the Bible, some of the figures that were in the Bible that were, not all of them were rich, but quite a good number of them were. Look at Esther. After she married the king, Esther was loaded. Look at King David, of course, he was a king. King Solomon, of course, he was a king. Look at Joseph. In Genesis, Joseph was in jail, and he had a skill set. Again, he was a dream interpreter, and Pharaoh had the dreams of calamity, and then he had the dreams of prosperity and then calamity. He needed somebody to interpret those dreams, and so Joseph had a unique skill and a unique talent and a unique God-given ability that brought him, and ultimately he became second in charge of Egypt. And during the famine, he ran the show because he gave all the orders. So just look at Daniel. Daniel served under 3 kings, 3 foreign kings. He was elevated to number 3 in the land as far as rank. So look at the disciples and Jesus. Jesus had a lot of wealthy followers. Look at Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Invited Jesus in his home and repented for stealing through taxation. Gave this grandiose feast, and celebration. Look at Mary and Martha. They weren't poor. They had servants if you read the Bible. Some of the disciples were pretty well off as well. So there's so many biblical examples of prosperity, and the Bible is clear. God wants to prosper us. He wants us to prosper. He wants us to go out and buy and sell and build, because it's in our nature to do so. We're made in his image, and it's in our nature to prosper. It's in our nature to build. And so he gave us the spiritual principles, and he gave us he gave us the ability to do so because he knows it's in our nature. We're created in his image. And so he knows, God knows, and he wants to prosper us. So I just find it odd that, in these times, you have so many Christians, especially in this country, in America, that are for wealth redistribution when there is power in the Bible for wealth creation. I don't understand that. I don't understand how you can be so resentful of the rich when God has given you the tools you need, and his spirit inside of you to go out and prosper and to be wealthy, and to do great things and to have a good name and to pass on that wealth. The Bible says that a good man leaves wealth to his children's children. So being wealthy is very much in line with, what God, has for his children in his kingdom. So I just don't understand the attraction, especially in the current climate, wealth redistribution and, so much government involvement when, you have a Bible and you have spiritual principles that will allow you to operate outside, of what's going on in this physical world, but yet the default is let's let government, come in and let's elevate government. Let's have an omnipresent government when we have an omnipresent God. I just find that's just kind of odd to me. It's really just kind of odd. When you look at the differences between, a controlled government and a free market government. I just, here recently, we had the crisis in Greece, and when it melted down over there, when, they were running out of money for pensions and retirement and so forth, and the EU stepped in and the International Monetary Fund, and they wanted Greece to, redo their retirements and so forth. I mean, you had people standing in bread lines. Now, concurrently in the United States, and I just remember this, not too long after that, Michael Jordan released, his latest shoes, and you had people standing in lines in America to pay early in the morning, waiting for Foot Locker and Finish Line and all these other outlet places to open, waiting in line to pay for $200 shoes. That's insane. But yet you have people that are born here that are advocating for socialism when we're standing in line for $200 shoes, when we're going in on, Black Friday, and we're going into Walmart for the TV special, when you have people running in lines, running to grab TVs. I mean, I was in Walmart in Saddlebrook, New Jersey on Black Friday, and I just wanted to get a few off items, that things people might not have been looking for. I got a computer printer, which nobody was looking for, at a good deal too. But people were grabbing TVs like we were running out of TVs, and I'm like, I love capitalism. I love this country. So that's kind of unhealthy though in a way, but still, it just goes to show how blessed we are, working in the financial section in New York in the financial district, and I had the pleasure of meeting a lot of people, from other countries, and I have friends that weren't born in this country, that came here from India and from China and, from different places, from Cuba, even from Cuba and from the Dominican Republic, and different places, Philippines, and they come here with, a few cents in their pocket, and they're making a good living. But yet you have people, and I'm particularly talking to African Americans, that are born here, and sometimes we're so blocked by, I think we're blocked by reverse racism that we don't take advantage of the opportunities that we have here. I mean, and it kind of goes back to that parable of the hidden treasure. I feel like Americans today that are born here, but yet are not taking advantage of the opportunity, are the first owner of that field. You don't know you have that hidden treasure there, but it's there. And you're going to sell the field. And when you sell the field, it's going to be too late. And right now, you're flirting with this idea of government intervention and omnipresent government. And you're in the process of selling that field, because I'm going to tell you this, once we don't have freedom here anymore, and the ability to lift yourself up by your own bootstraps through a free market, and the ability to go out and to get paid for your gift and earn and become prosperous, you're really going to be hurt, because you're going to have a high taxation government, high entitlement government that's going to limit opportunities and limit creativity and limit growth. You think you think there's a disparity now? To all my progressive listeners, you think there's a disparity now? You will be weeping if America was ever fully converted to a socialist government. And you look at the history of this world, everywhere it's been tried, it's failed, and we are no exception. Especially now that we're so much in debt. We're the highest economy, because we have an economy worth about $15.8 trillion, but we have a $16 trillion debt, which means we're the highest debtor nation. And the only thing that's saving us is that we're the reserve currency for the world, and that we have the largest, in terms of assets and production. But even that's declining. Our GDP is declining because we're in so much debt. And so I find it, it's just ironic. Like, we're all children of the free market. And I'm not saying it's a perfect system, but the free market to date, is the best system that we've ever had. Just look at the rags and riches stories that we went over earlier. Just look at your ability to go out and earn, a decent wage, or, to start your own business, or to, create a good or a service. So we don't have that safety net that a lot of countries have, but it's a lot easier to move up in this free market system than it is a controlled government or a socialist government. Millions of people every year are fleeing those governments and coming here. So what does that tell you? And sometimes legal and sometimes illegal. So if they're willing to break the law to get in America, my God, we have it good. So just an observation that I wanted to put in. So I think that's really it. The next installment, we're going to talk about the history of some of the free market things that happen in this country. We're also going to talk a great deal about charity, because I believe in charity. Charity is very biblical. Very biblical. And we benefit from charity, not only as givers and receivers, but just as a society. I think we're a more charitable society than a lot of times that's advertised. So I wanted to leave you with this. Thank you very much for tuning in for this episode, and thank you all for your time. I hope you've been blessed, and you have a blessed weekend and a blessed week. Thank you very much. You have a good evening.